Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Andrea Gonzalez with Trellis Strategies. We are so happy to have you, and I know it's the lunch hour if you're in Central Time, so hopefully this will be a fun little lunch discussion for you. Folks are still filing in, so I'm going to give them another minute as people transition from their previous meeting, maybe heading over here. Okay, thank you for joining our discussion today. We are in our fourth Trellis Strategies 360 discussion series. And in this series, we're discussing institutional transformation to empower modern learners. Today's discussion is our fourth in this series, and we'll specifically be discussing the role of outcomes and accountability as institutions undertake transformation to meet the needs of today's learners. Our discussion will be led by our president and CEO, Dr. Debra Chromy. Debra, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to get us started.
That sounds great. Thank you, Andrea, and thanks for all the work behind the scenes to put this together, not just this one, but our entire series. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I think you're in for a really exciting conversation. Really pleased to have two wonderful panelists with me today. Let me do some introductions. First, as Andrea mentioned, I am President and CEO here at Trellis Company, and just celebrated my 4-year anniversary here. So excited to continue on and see what great things we can do. I'm going to start by introducing Eric Bing. Eric is Chancellor and Chief Executive Officer at the College of Healthcare Professions. Eric has devoted his career to expanding healthcare education, quality healthcare, and workforce development opportunities. Since 2014, he has led the College of Healthcare Professionals, CHCP, the largest allied healthcare training provider in Texas, and has spearheaded the institution's work to continuously raise graduation and employment outcomes. Under his leadership, CHCP developed and implemented a national recognized flexible and stackable pathway model to enable economic mobility for working adults with very complicated lives, and built a true career-focused strategy in partnership with over 2,500 employers. I had the opportunity earlier this year to actually visit one of CHCP's campuses and was beyond impressed, Eric, by you, your team, and your students. So welcome. So pleased to have you here.
Thank you, Debra.
Next, we have Dr. Walter Kimbrough. He is interim president of Talladega College. And I just learned he has a new president coming in there on July 1st. Dr. Kimbrough brings a wealth of experience as a distinguished academic and with a proven track record of leadership in higher education. Dr. Kimbrough is widely respected for his dynamic leadership and innovative approach to education. He has served in various influential roles in higher education spaces, where he has been instrumental in enhancing academic programs, increasing enrollment, and strengthening community partnerships. So Walter, thank you also. So pleased to have you here, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. So I'm going to jump in and just set a little background for our discussion. Here at Trellis Strategies, we like to use the term modern learner. It's our way of describing today's students. And by that, I mean the fact that they come from all different backgrounds. Many of them are adult learners, and we need to think about them differently in terms of how they come to education, what that pathway looks like, all of that. So, and I think we're really lucky with Eric and Walter here today, because they represent a couple of really unique populations that I think from each other and individually that I think will really help us in this conversation. I'm going to start with a couple of statistics that come from our most recent Student Financial Wellness Survey. We just posted our results this spring. We surveyed students in the fall of 2024. And let me share with you that about 2/3 of respondents say that they work for pay while enrolled. 2/3 of the respondents. Many of these working students work full-time, approximately 43%, and 25% of them hold more than one job. Over 1/3 of them, 36%, identify primarily as a worker who goes to school. And when we look at the community college population, that number is up in the 40%. So they really see themselves rather as a student, rather than seeing themselves as a student who works, they see themselves as a worker who's going to school. And that means a lot of different things in terms of supports for this population. And affording a post-secondary education is becoming increasingly challenging for these learners, not just affording them, but fitting it into their lives. Overall, the many demands on the student's time can impede their academic progress. For example, by limiting their ability to attend class consistently. Our 2024 Student Financial Wellness Survey found that 24% of parents had missed at least one day of class due to a lack of childcare. 25% of working students missed at least one day of class due to conflicts with their work schedule, and 15% of all respondents missed class at least sometime due to lack of transportation. So despite these challenges, this is really an interesting finding of this report. So with all these and so many other challenges that are identified as a result of this survey, 73% of our respondents still agree that college is a good investment in their financial future. And 84% of respondents believe a college degree will provide them with a higher quality of life. Students attending two-year institutions were especially likely to believe in the worth of college, and were also more likely to say they would recommend their school to prospective students. I think, Eric and Walter, you've probably both seen our survey results, and there's a lot more in there. But to get us started and to understand your perspective and where you're coming from, I'm going to ask you each first to tell me a little bit about your student body. And how they might align with some of the statistics I just shared. So Eric, why don't I start off with you?
Sure. Thanks, Deborah. And your study personifies the College of Healthcare professions, students. We call them aspiring professionals because they also see the tremendous importance of receiving higher ed and having an opportunity for higher ed that works for them and the lives they're living. And when you look at our student body, we are 89% of color, 90% women, 72% are 22 years or older, only 12% are out of high school, and 38% are first gen. If you look at our Hispanic population, 74% are first gen. And 39% have dropped out of college or have a little bit of college and some before. They have tried in traditional settings. So they understand the importance, but as your study also showed, for them, so much of it, and there's a myriad of reasons, but really it comes down to, as an adult learner trying to juggle, work, childcare, and transportation. And it's not just childcare, it's adult care too.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of the things in a minute that your institution does, but let me bring Walter into the conversation. And Walter, tell us a little bit about the population at Talladega and how they may or may not align with these statistics.
Right. So we're going to be a little bit on a different end, even though, we're still, about 2/3 of our students, or really probably over 70%, are Pell Grant eligible students. So a lot of low income students, over 90% students of color. So those are some similarities with Eric's group. But we have a very traditional student population. So there's still, particularly students from, populations of color who still look at this opportunity to go off to college. It's something that's in the American ethos. Popular culture still, talks about that. And as I heard several years ago, someone said that for a lot of families, college is still the best halfway house in America to give folks. My daughter just finished her first year at Fordham in New York. And I was just like, yeah, not only do you have to get out the house, go far away. It's like just so, there still is a lot of that. So we get a lot of those who are just like, yeah, you just go to Talladega and go and grow up and find yourself. And there's still some of that, but they still have some of those challenges. And what we're finding too, that I've learned, we have a lot of those students who have parents who really will fit that mode of, I need to go back to college because it can increase my earning power. I'm struggling to put my child through school. Can I go back? And we actually have, a degree completion program. Recently, we just had commencement, and a number of those graduates got inspired because they dropped their child off to college at Talladega. And they said, wow, this should be our chance to. We had a couple that graduated, a married couple, and they talked about how their son graduated from Talladega a couple of years ago, and they finished this degree completion program because they were inspired bringing him back to college. So those are the kinds of things. So, we're much more traditional age population, but our population is being impacted and would have a lot of students that are going to be similar to Eric's population of people going back to college. We're seeing that in parents and other relatives.
Yeah, this is great. We have a very broad perspective represented here by your two student bodies. So I'm going to jump into a couple more questions, and we're going to start by how we measure success. So Eric, I'll come back to you again and ask you, how do you define institutional success, and how do you measure it at CHCP?
Well, there's really three ways that we look at it. And it really comes down to, again, we're almost all adult learners, and they are very focused on improving their lot in life. And so for us, we measure everything by high graduation rates, high national certification rates, and high placement rates in the field that they are studying. That's really where it all comes down to.
So I know you mentioned placement rates, so I'm going to push a little further and see, have you started doing any research or looking at, from a longitudinal perspective, yes, they get placed. Are they able to continue to advance as they go forward in their work life?
Yes, they definitely do. And part of it is the way we built our programs is very much earn and learn. Because these are folks who are having to work, take care of kids, all the other things that life has given them. And so we have built our programs so they're stackable. And we're in healthcare too. So it can be more defined than if you're just liberal arts. But so we have our programs where we're one of the few colleges in the country where certificates can actually pretty much fully transfer into associate's completions. And then our associates go into bachelor's completions. We actually don't even offer a 4-year bachelor's anymore. We only offer bachelor's completions. We used to, but we took it away because so many folks think that's what they want to start in, but their life really doesn't allow it. So let's do stackable earn and learn. And so we have a lot of our students that do that pathway. And a matter of fact, I just heard about an amazing story of a student who started us in 2006. Her name is Justina King. A matter of fact, in 2000, about 5 years ago, there was a national story about her in one of the national mags. And she started off, she was working in a car wash, PetSmart, had a child, no regular hours, all of the things, wasn't respected, wasn't making any money, no health insurance. She found our limited medical radiology tech program, 13-month certificate. From that, she had her second child. Then she had benefits, steady hour. Her employer, who we work with a lot of employers, helped her flexible hours. She then bulk transferred that into a radiology tech program. And just this year, and think about this, she started in 2006. She has decided she's finishing up a healthcare management bachelor's completion program.
Wow.
So, she did it when it fit her schedule. Obviously, once she had become a radiology tech, and she had stabilized economically. But it's interesting how people's pathways go.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And we'll get into more of that in a little bit, but I want to bring Walter in to talk a little bit about how at Talladega you measure success, and how do you define it, really?
Yeah, so for a place like Talladega, as I indicated, I've been here almost a year now, just for this 1-year interim period. But I look at, for traditional or most of the traditional student population, we look at graduation rates as well. And there's been a lot of conversations about that, particularly in terms of members of Congress, because I think people are concerned that the graduation rates aren't where they think they should be. I always like to make sure that we put graduation rates in context. And so, I'll lean on my experience as president of Dillard University. I was there for 10 years. And there's really good research that indicates the greater your student body that is Pell eligible, the lower the graduation rate is. So if your Pell population is less than 20%, your graduation rate is probably over 70%. If your Pell population is over 60%, your graduation rate is about 30%. So, when I would tell people that our graduation rate at Dillard was about 50%, they're like, well, that's only half of the students. I'm like, yeah, but we're 75% Pell. So we're not only are we 20 points above what we would expect it to be, if you're a statistical nerd like me, you're outside of one standard deviation, which means you're really doing something that's special because those students that are high Pell, there are so many different things that happen that will derail or slow down your opportunity to graduate. And so then I have this broader definition of success, particularly at commencement. I always ask students to stand if they started college 10 years or more, because those people, I call them persisters. Something happened, life happened, and they came back and they finished. To me, that's success too. They won't show up in our, if they started as a first-time, full-time freshman, they won't show up in your graduation rate. But are they a success? Absolutely. And you have to celebrate those as well. So, I think that we have to make sure we use those numbers in context, because a lot of times people will say, well, let's look at Ivy League institutions and what their graduation rate is, and that should be the norm. It's like, yeah, but if you're 5% Pell eligible and you got a long history of people who've gone to college and your family, earns X amount, that's a different standard than, places where you have a lot of, first generation, single parent household, high Pell students. That's another thing. So I make sure that I have the context. So when I give people the context to say schools like ours at a Dillard or even a Talladega, where you're high Pell eligible, you expect graduation rate that's about 32%. But if I'm at 50%, that means I'm really doing something that's really good. And people just say, oh, so they get it then, but it has to have the context.
Yeah, so, thank you. That's really interesting. And I guess I want to pick up on that a little bit and talk about your population, especially if it's a Pell, whether at Dillard or at Talladega. What can you do to be more supportive of those, especially those? So the reality is, for the majority of students today, the educational journey is not linear. They're going to drop in, drop out, drop in based on life events and what's going on. So could you share, Walter, some of the ways at Talladega and maybe Dillard before your institution considered this modern learner, their priorities, and ways that you can support them through this journey that they're going through?
So the best example I use is, once again, right before I started at Dillard, they did a survey to try to figure out what happens when students don't return? Mm-hmm. What's the number one reason? A lot of people would think, oh, maybe it's their academic, their high school credentials or their ACT score. Our number one reason was unmet financial need. Yeah. That was it with our population, unmet financial need. So we created a separate fund. We raised money primarily through alums, but we had some foundations that chipped in as well. And we created what we called a safe fund, that if a student had an unmet financial need, if we partnered and put some money toward that would improve our graduation rates, which it did pretty significantly. It's an idea I got from Georgia State. I did my PhD at Georgia State. In one of the alumni magazines, they talked about these Panther retention grants. As little as $500 could keep people in school. So I said, well, we're a private school. If we could do $1,000 or $2,000, we could have the same impact. And we absolutely could do that. So, we put other support systems in place, recognizing that life happens and other things, happen, and, better support, advising, and those kinds of things, particularly for first generation students. But that research that was done prior to my arrival proved to be spot on for us. When we cut down the unmet financial need, students were able to stay in school and stay on track. Now, once again, Dillard, and even Philander Smith, just like Talladega, very much a traditional age population. The vast majority of students are going to be in that 18 to 24-year range. So not as many returning non-traditional students, which now they're the majority. So the non-traditionals are now the traditional students. But that 18 to 24-year-old group is normally what I've led institutions to serve. So that was the way we just looked at our own research to say, this is the barrier that we have. And so if we can do something about that, we could improve our graduation rates, which we absolutely did.
Yeah, no, thank you for Walter. Walter, thank you for that. I will say that And I'll ask Andrea if she can find the statistic and drop it in the chat here. It's one of the things from our student financial wellness survey we find it's $500 or less that causes someone to stop out. And it's usually a car is broken down, it's something really basic, and then they get off track. I also want to say, I love the fact that you're celebrating people who it might be 10 years because they are stepping out and back in again. And I love that. I think it's great. I'm going to bring Eric in. Looks like you're ready to jump in and answer the same question about, what you do to really think about the modern learners. That's most of your population in different ways that you support them.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting. There's so many correlations, Walter, but yet it is different because these are folks, and as you were saying, Deborah, most of them, work and family is coming first. And it comes down to, again, so what we did is about 10 years ago, we stepped back, we did a ton of surveying too. And, again, it came up that what we're trying to work with is creating an environment for somebody, and really kind of taking a single mother persona that is 25 years old or older. And again, that's the average, and creating an environment where they can find success. And that means dealing with work, adult and child care, and transportation. And so what we did is we totally changed our model. We did not used to have certificates that could transfer into associates programs. So we made all of our programs stackable. Wherever you can, we try to start somebody in a certificate because somebody getting through a 9-month certificate might be like you, Deborah, about the same type of effort of getting through a PhD if you're living day to day. Again, our average student coming to us, the median, what they're making when they come to us for a certificate is only $2,600 a year. If they come for an associate's, it's about $11,000. So these are folks that are living day to day. So one is short-term and stackable, just like I talked about Justina's story. And also, Walter, big shout out for you of looking at it long-term too, to the 10 years and above there, because look at Justina, she didn't decide to finish up in 10, for quite a long time. The other one is flexible but structured programs. If our students, when you are trying to manage childcare, we were trying to figure out how can we help them with that and their work. And also, if you've only got one car using the bus or whatever, how can you be more flexible? So what we did is we moved our programming to flipped classroom, 2 days on campus, and the rest of their work is online. Well, think about that. If you go from 4 to 5 days to 2 days, you only need half the childcare. You have more flexibility in getting in your 40, 60 hours, whatever you're working, some 80, multiple jobs. And it just creates tremendous flexibility. We have day, evening, the 2-day. We have online with boot camps where you only come in a few weekends that spend all the time. Again, solving for the life that our folks are living. Because just as you talk about $500, if your car breaks down or you don't have childcare, you're not going to leave your kid in the car. You're going to miss class. And then it snowballs. So those are the pieces. The others, work integrated learning. All of our programs, other than just a couple of the bachelor's completions, we put them in externships with our 2,300 employer partners across the state. So, and then a tremendous amount are hired directly out of their externships. And the last is creating a sense of belonging where they feel just because you're first gen or you've never known anybody in a professional setting, you're creating an environment where everybody understands that it is normal, that's why you're in our colleges, because you're the first one and you're to be celebrated for it.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great, Eric. I'm just going to pick up on something that you talked about. And I know, Walter, you're about to leave Talladega and hopefully go on to be a president in another institution, because we'd hate to lose you out of this world. When you think about four-year institutions, and in particular, the fact that we have this demographic cliff that's coming. In fact, I believe we said this, what I heard was that this is probably the largest high school class we'll have, and it's going to start dropping after that. And thinking about this population of adult learners, do you see, and I'm going to ask you a general, more philosophical question about changing at a four-year institution, looking at changing and doing some of the things that Eric is doing at CHCP to be able to create a more flexible learning environment for those who are over 22 or adults who want to come back and complete a degree, et cetera?
Yeah, I think there are institutions that are looking to do that. So I've looked at some of the numbers that have been projected over time. And so because I first became a president in 2004. So even as I watched the numbers come down from the cliff, they're still higher than what they were when I first became a president. So I don't freak out about it as much. I'm like, well, 15, 20 years from now, it's still more students that were in higher ed when I first became a president. So I look at it differently because I've been around for a while. I think that a lot of institutions are trying to do a lot of things to just reach out to everybody, and we don't have enough institutions that are really specializing in doing what they do and do it well. So like listening to what Eric does at his institution, I'm like, man, that's great. They should just lean into that because they're doing a good job at that. And he's mastered that. It doesn't make sense for me to try to say, well, what can I sort of do? Because, if I try to halfway do that and I keep trying to do what I'm doing, then you sort of get all over the place. It doesn't really work out well. Like I said, there are always going to be those recent high school grads that want to go off to college and the parents like me that want to kick them out of the house. I have a rising 11th grader. He definitely has to get out the house. It's not even close. I don't want him doing online, none of that. He has to go. So there's always going to be a population for that as well. So I think that different students need different kinds of experiences and those kinds of things. So it's not that everybody has to say, oh, we've got a cliff, so let's try to do this, because what I worry about is people halfway doing those things and you don't have a really robust learning experience for those students versus places, like I said, like listen to what Eric does. It's like, yeah, it seems like he's really figuring out how to do that and do that well. And so I think there will be institutions that do certain things and do those well. And that still means that there's other opportunities for institutions to do other things. So I think there's still, in the higher ed ecosystem, everybody doesn't have to try to be all things to all people. We should figure out what we do well and do those really well. And I think that's what, particularly from people in Congress, they want us to show that the things that we're doing well. And I think that there's still a lot of room for improvement for those kinds of things. So that's, there are varying degrees of things you can do. And I'm sure lots of people will continue to have degree completion programs. We have one at Talladega, but most of the people who will do that program have a connection with Talladega. It's not going to be, some national draw for people, particularly when you have the Southern New Hampshire's that spend a quarter of their budget on advertising. I can't compete with that. So there's no need for me to try to do that. So those are the things I think about.
Thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. There's going to be a need for every single type of institution because students are coming at it from all different perspectives. But I did want to pick up on something that you spoke about in regards to, what Congress is looking at and what this administration is looking at in terms of tying post-secondary education to workforce or in-demand jobs. And I'm going to start with you because Eric's already all over this. I know that's what they do at CHCP. But can you talk about what you've done either at Dillard or at Talladega that is focused on alignment, educational programs aligning with the workforce of the future, especially since and this has been true, I think, for a while now, there are careers and job titles that don't exist today that are going to exist in 4 years. So Can you talk a little bit about what it is that your institution is doing to really help students get ready and align with what is going to be needed in the future?
Yes, I was at a conference a few years ago and they gave a statistic about like in a certain number of years, most of those jobs don't even exist. And so for higher ed, for us to think about how do you get faculty to prepare students for careers that we don't even know will exist? Mm-hmm. And so I think for us, a lot of that is there has to be much more emphasis on some of those fundamental skills that you can use, and no matter what you need to, whatever field you're in. I think we throw around this idea of critical thinking. That skill needs to be developed much more now. When you start looking at some of the AI videos, you're trying to figure out is that real? Or, I mean, and even being able to interpret, because I think we are leaning into AI so much, and it depends upon what sources of data is that AI program using to come up with an answer. I've done presentations and shown people that the answer provided by AI is absolutely wrong. And some will say sometimes AI can be one of the greatest purveyors of misinformation because it depends upon where they're drawing the information from. So there has to be some basic skills that we strengthen in terms of communication and critical thinking, those kinds of things that are just very broad. So not even so much as, you're planning to be this career that doesn't exist because we don't know what it is, to say, what are some real skills that we know aren't going away? And in fact, we're watching these skills need to be developed at an even greater pace so that when those new careers develop, you have the skills to be able to do that. So, I mean, it's going to be a lot of technology kinds of things, but there are sometimes they're out of the ordinary. There's a writer that talked about we need more people who go to medical school who have degrees in like the humanities and in theater, because they need to be able to help work with the patient so that they can help paint a picture of what's going on with the patient. And you just can't be a biology person that speaks biology. How do you learn how to communicate with people so that you're able to do a more robust assessment of where they are? Those are the kinds of things I think we have to think about. So that's when I think about that question in terms of that, it's like, yeah, how do I get a faculty member who's gone through the traditional ranks and they're preparing to, be a physics professor? How are they going to help someone prepare for a job that they don't even know is going to happen? And I think we ask a lot of our professors then to be sort of like these prognosticators of what's going to happen. They aren't going to be able to do all of that. They might see some signs, but what are those skills that they're like, we're seeing how things are moving. Here are some skills that you need to really develop to be able to meet that moment. So that's the way I look at it, more so as the skills that are going to be needed, as well as having much closer relationships with industry. I remember sitting on, like your regional chambers of commerce, both in Little Rock and New Orleans. We've got to work more closely with industry to say, this is where our industry is going. This is what we need. And I think higher ed, we've done a poor job of doing that. We just sort of playing what we want to. And industry says, yeah, we don't need that. We need this. So that's got to be, we've got to have much closer partnerships with industry as we plan out these careers for the future.
Yeah, Walter, I couldn't agree with you more on all your points, but the ability to look at something that maybe is AI generated and say, does that look right? I think we need to double check this, or this doesn't align with my thinking. And, that ability to see and to understand underneath. And, I just saw, I think it was last week, the first robotic heart transplant took place. So to your point about doctors, I'm not saying they don't need to still, learn and understand everything that's going on, but the bedside manner piece is, so huge. I couldn't agree. Eric, I'm going to bring you in. I know you do some of this already, but same question, as things change and technology is coming into the space, I think, again, the medical profession is always going to need that human touch, a person there. But can you talk a little bit about how you think about this going forward?
So we look at it very holistically, and I'll give you an example. On tomorrow and Wednesday, we have a internationally recognized professor from Thunderbird ASU, Dr. Tom Hunsucker, coming in to spend 2 days with our campus presidents and leadership talking about innovation and agility. Because we also believe that we've got to make sure we keep all of our faculty and all of our 1,200 team members up to speed and in a mode of being able to think about change as it happens. And as you just were saying, Debra, I mean, it's happening so fast in healthcare. We are watching programs change in 6-month timeframes and us having to adjust curriculums. Again, we have, over around 2,500 employer partners. We've placed with over 5,000 in the last 5 years. And we are very, very close to our employer partners. We consider them just as much a customer as our students. And we're not a research-based college group. So we are very focused on the student and also our employer partners, because if our employer partners are not happy with the outcome, then our students aren't going to get placed. And so really listening closely to what is happening with them. Technology is a huge piece of it. If you think about who we are working with as a student, they're not used to having a ton of technology. The other one is using your cell phone. It wouldn't really show up here versus computers and equipment is very, very different. It's one of the reasons why we went to flipped classroom 10 years ago because they had to learn how to use a laptop. Everybody gets a laptop when they come into our programs. And so I think from our standpoint, we're looking at, first of all, is creating a mindset of agility, of critical thinking, of being able to see when things are wrong. I love that, Walter, what you were saying about that on AI. We do these quarterly all staff calls, and we did a Google generated podcast. And I left the errors in it on purpose so everybody could pick them out and see how it's not perfect. But the other side of it is you look at radiology, for example, radiologists, AI is reading most scans better than the human eye now. And that's just a change that's happening. So how do we adjust? And I think creating that flexibility, but also I think another part of it is for institutions to pick up the speed because change is happening and you can't be as glacial as you used to be in order to stay relevant. And I think that also then translates into our students. This is the world that we live in, and that's how we kind of address it.
Yeah, I think you both have hit on a really important part, which is not only administrative staff, but faculty and making sure that they are thinking about this from a
Yes.
future perspective. Yeah. Yeah. So staying with you for a minute, Eric, as I mentioned at Trellis, we believe that the post-secondary education journey for students is no longer linear. And students primarily identify as employees or caregivers instead of students. And I think you referenced both child and adult caregivers. Can you speak to how this may impact measuring accountability for modern learners? I know Walter mentioned earlier celebrating 10 years out, but thinking about how we think about folks, and this is I hate to use this word, but it comes up now all the time when families are looking at, or individuals are looking at, they're looking at the ROI, right? They're looking for that return on money, not just money spent, but the opportunity cost, right? Their time, et cetera. So can you talk a little bit about how all these changes impact this sort of measuring of accountability for modern learners?
Well, first of all, we are huge believers in accountability is really caring because so many of our students got pushed through K through 12, even though they didn't have the skill set. So we build a lot into our programs to help people to level up. The other thing is we are huge believers in just because you had a bad K through 12 or didn't go to preschool doesn't mean you still can't be an extraordinary success. And we see it every day with our students. But I think, so one is accountability to us is very important. The other one is the reason that our aspiring professionals come to the College of Healthcare Professions is because they want they want a career. They don't want to be in just a job. They don't want to be in all this part-time retail and all the other stuff that they're stuck in. They want a professional career. They want better for their children. So for us, it still comes down to accountability is whether they're doing a CERT, associates, or completing their bachelor's. And you can go straight through and get a bachelor's in 3.5 years with us. Very, very few people do it. Are we creating that outcome that they have come and enrolled for us on? And on 95% of it, it is because they want to move into a professional career. And so that is really how we gauge it. And of course, you can't be in a professional career if you've been pushed through or you haven't graduated, and you also haven't been able to pass your national certification test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thanks. Walter, same question for you.
Restate again the question.
Sure. Sorry about that. It's really looking at if you can speak to how these changes in terms of the population of students. And again, I know you're more traditionally based, but those that may be identifying as employees first and students second. How will this impact measuring accountability for modern learners? And I think about, what you said about celebrating 10 people 10 years out and that type of thing. But you're right. Today, when we measure success at an institution, we're looking at 4-year and 6-year graduation rates. And I don't think that's the right way long term to be measuring this, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I was thinking earlier when we were beginning the conversation about those kinds of learners that view themselves, first as workers, and they're in their careers. I think we could create new ways to track those students, to talk about that differently. So, like I said, the traditional federal designations, when they look at retention and graduation rates, they're only looking at first-time, full-time students. Right. So those students, they don't even show up in our numbers. So it's not like they are a negative, but you don't get really credit for those. There's a school in New Orleans, Southern University in New Orleans. They end up getting a lot of students who transferred from other places. And so they graduate a lot of people, but people look at their first-time, full-time graduation rate. It isn't great. And they say, well, you guys aren't really doing a good job. It's like, no, what they do a good job in is with those students who come from other places that have, their work first. And so I think we've got to maybe create new ways to talk about those students, so that institutions and get credit for the work that they do, as well as we recognize those students with that, that's their reality as well. I guess the other thing I would just say as a part of that too, though, we want to make sure, and like I said, I think the way that Eric does with their program is that we're making sure that they are really still getting a high quality education, and not just, people just trying to earn a credential to make more money, or, because I think sometimes when I watch the commercials of the big online providers, and they're just like, I'm taking class, I'm in a grocery store and I'm in my pajamas. It's like, yeah, I don't really know about that. I want to make sure you're focused at least to understand what you need to be able to do to effectively, do your job. So those are the kinds of things that, I think we have to focus on, that high quality as well. And it's an engaging process. But I think there is a way to carve out another group of people that are, primarily workers, and they go to school, and a way to look at them, and then find a way to say, how do we talk about accountability with that group? We just haven't had that conversation in higher education and with the federal government. So I think that's an opportunity.
Great. And that's a very nice segue into my last question before I open it up for those participating to ask questions. And that is, what future trends do you foresee in the relationship between post-secondary education and workforce demands? And I'm going to start with you, Walter.
Like I said earlier, I just think there has to be much closer alignment with faculty working primarily with industry and being on the cusp as industry innovates, that we're a part of that. Because I think now we're just sort of in our own silo. And you look at, some places, I had a faculty member at Dillard who spent a week or two on the Google campus, and he just felt like it was a really interesting experience for him. This is someone who's got, PhD from a major, flagship institution, and the people who are running the courses are 25, 26 years old. Yeah. And he was like, it was just, but that was like, he said, that's what I'm dealing with. And so we've got to work together, because it's some of those fields, like some of those tech careers, those aren't people with PhDs that are innovating and doing all of that. So how do we work closely together? I think that's the opportunity. I think higher ed is still needed to do some of the training that industry can't do, and they can't scale it up fast enough, but they need to be able to have much more input in terms of what we're teaching and how it benefits just broader society. So that would be the thing I would think of.
Yeah, and that's a great perspective for institutions to be willing, and faculty to open up and have those dialogues with industry. Eric, I'll turn the same question over to you.
So first of all, there is no question from our standpoint, we want to stay connected to what's happening in industry. Obviously, we're healthcare, and we've stayed in our lane in healthcare. It's our vertical. The other is we're not trying to be Harvard. We know where our focus is, and it is on this massive amount of adult learners that have some education, the tens of millions of them that are trying, or none, that are first-time learners that are trying to come back. So when you look at innovating around that is really understanding what is going to work for them. I'm very excited about AI because I think it's going to allow us to move from a lot of the things we've been doing in adaptive learning into more personalized learning. We're already seeing it with student assist products and other pieces out there and pieces we're able to do to create more of a personalized experience for somebody who doesn't have the luxury and the tremendous opportunity it is to go to a Talladega where you can, for 4 years, or spend time away, and because it's passed our students by. So I look at the technology used moving towards personalized education that is happening more and more with AI. And I think the other one is we are got to stay closer than ever before to what the market is demanding because things are moving so fast right now. And I think it's only going to speed up. I don't know if you've been reading the articles about what's happened to the placement, the job placement rates of folks coming out of four-year colleges this year. It's a tough year. And a lot of that is because all of these jobs, like the lower jobs in insurance and in banking and all of these, a lot of them have already started to go away with AI. So, but that doesn't mean there's not a tremendous need for higher ed to develop folks that are able to take our economy and our institutions to the next level and through the next century.
Great. Thank you both. I'm going to open it up and see if there are any questions. Andrea, have you seen any come in?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
Your responses have been so thorough.
Well, I will say she did find the stat for us. I don't know if you two can see it, but 56% of students we surveyed would have trouble finding $500 in cash or credit in an emergency.
Yeah.
So that sort of underscores Walter's earlier point of his survey before he started his time at Dillard. So this is my favorite question to ask. And it's the magic wand question. You have one wish. You have one wish of something that you can change related to outcomes and accountability. It could be how it's measured. It could be something you would like to see Congress or this administration do. But if you had the power to implement one change, what would that be? And I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
Well, I'll jump in because I pretty much still have the same answer all the time. I really wish that, as a nation, we would still invest more in higher education. Mm-hmm. And it could be something as simple as doubling or even tripling the Pell Grant. Yeah. Because that would allow a lot of people to, have that experience. I think there still is, for some people, to have that time to sort of, continue to grow up, I think is still really good. There's still lots of lessons they could learn. And to be able to do that and not have all of the financial strain to really invest in people like that. And even if you just increase persons who are coming back to school, they could use that as well. There's so many other opportunities I think we could have. So that I think that would improve just in terms of overall accountability, because right now what's really happened over the last 50 some odd years, almost 60 years, is that we've gone from an ethos of saying that higher education was a public good to now it's a private good. And I want us to sort of move back to it being a public good where we're investing. So no matter where you are on the spectrum and you're trying to improve your, educational opportunities, whether you're 18-year-old right out of high school or someone who's, 50 years old and you got a family and you're trying to go back to school, that there is more support that we provide as a nation, that no matter what your lot in life is, we're a nation that believes in education, particularly for people who need that support. And Pell Grants are a way to do it. So that's the thing that could be, but that means everybody has to own the outcome. It's not just pointing fingers to say you higher ed aren't doing a good enough job. It's like we've got to invest more in higher education. So, there are some cost savings I think that we'll get, and I think AI will help do some of those cost savings. But that's the thing I wish we would really, invest in higher education. no matter where you are in terms of your life cycle, that you want to be involved, you want to learn more, even if it's just for the sake of learning, I think would be great.
Yeah, that's great, Walter. I remember at one point I was, I really believed in front loading Pell, so that if people tried higher ed, post-secondary ed, and it wasn't for them, they could leave without debt. Years ago, my organization and a few others participated in a study of those that stop out early on. And it usually is in the first year. If they make it into the second year or third, then there's so much greater probability that they will complete. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Walter. All right, Eric, the magic wand's in your hand now.
Well, I like Walter's, and I'll tack on that from my perspective. I wish we could move the national conversation for people and the conversation not to be focused when everybody thinks college, they think traditional, the old traditional 4-year school, everything's Ivy League. That's it. Walking the through the quad, all of that world. And I think that if we could separate out and people understand and think about from everything from policy to internally in our colleges to the high schools all the way down, there are so many pathways and people's lives are different now that we would have a lot more success through all institutions in this country, and therefore for the whole country as a whole.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eric. Mark Milliron, who is president out at National University, shared with me recently a statistic that said 19% of every student currently enrolled is actually a traditional, what we would call traditional student. 81% are what you would call non-traditional.
Yeah.
But you're right. I would say anytime a legislator at the state level or the federal level looks at creating policy, they've got the kid with the backpack walking on the campus right out of high school.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying we don't keep that population in mind and make sure there are programs for them, but we're designing for the 20% and leaving the 80% out. And there needs to be more of a balance here. So I couldn't agree with you more, Eric. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
I'll give the audience one final chance, Andrea. Not hearing from Andrea.
Nothing has come in.
All right. Well then,
Okay.
Walter and Eric, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. It went by so fast, but thank you for making the time today. Eric, enjoyed having you again, and again, loved visiting your campus. Walter, I wish you the best. I can't wait to see where you land. Some institution is going to be pretty darn lucky to have you as their next president. So thank you all very much for joining us today, and especially to Eric and Walter, and to Andrea Gonzalez, who puts these together and does such a fabulous job. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.
Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome.
Andrea. Yep.
Bye.